He's interceding for all of mankind, for all of history. Now, that's a much better situation than interceding for one brother. If you're the one brother, who cares about the rest of mankind? But if you're anybody other than Cain, it's pretty good to have an interceder who's cried out for mercy for us, every one of us. And he cries out on our behalf. And the Father says, got it, son. You can come to me, because now when I look at you, the whole thing about the mediator is that Jesus presents and represents mankind to God. God looks at mankind through Jesus Christ. We come into a relationship, man to God, through Jesus Christ. When Jesus says, forgive them, it's much bigger than Abel's blood crying out. And by the way, again, I'm not trying to drag you into what I think and what I believe. I'm sharing with you what I think and believe. I'm not trying to drag you into it. It's just the way it appears to me. But in the Hebrew, the word cried out, the Hebrew word means to shriek. Its primary thing is that it's just a tremendous scream. But its secondary definition is to cry out for an assembly, to help put something back together again. You cannot use that Hebrew word in a context of separating somebody. That's not its definition. Its definition is Abel crying out, how can we put this back together? How can we have a restored relationship? When you look at the words in that context and you see our Father's conversation with Cain, I mean, there's like mercy and grace all over the place. But I had a funny feeling that in Genesis 2, 3, 4, 5, all through there, all these things that take place with Eve's deception and Adam's disobedience and the whole thing and the serpent and Cain and Abel, not a single time is there any like disgust, anger, frustration, anything like that from God. And I want you to think about that, because we've got this picture of God, we mess up, we screw up, and he's going to come in and deal with us. And boy, he's mad now. Our God's an angry God, that kind of thing. He's walking in the garden, and it says they heard the voice of the Lord walking in the garden. When he calls out to Adam, where are you? And that whole thing, there's never anything in there that's emotional on God's behalf. He's just coming and dealing with them in love. He's meeting them where they're at. And if you go back to the garden, you've got the man and the woman, both in a bad state. And God's looking right at them. And he's talking with them. Because if he can't help them, nobody can. I guess what I don't ever encourage anybody to screw up. But what I do want to encourage all of us is when we do, he's not saying, I am so disgusted. I can't believe you did that. What is wrong with you? That is just not even on the page with our Father. He's calling us to himself. He wants us to come closer, because if we don't, we're in deep trouble. The further we get from him, the deeper in trouble we get. And he wants us to live. He wants us to know life more abundantly. He wants us to know love and to know peace and to know consolation. If we don't know that, how can you offer it to somebody else? If you don't know that you're loved unconditionally by God, how can you love somebody else unconditionally? Love one another as I've loved you. I've given you a demonstration. Without that demonstration, how would you know what it's about? Now, let's finish up this morning and finish up our series by reading the rest of Hebrews 12, verses 24 through 29.
You have come to Jesus, the one who mediates the new covenant between God and people, and to the sprinkled blood which speaks of forgiveness, and instead of crying out for beep, like the blood of Abel.
She bleeped there. It was a little beep.
Verse 25, be careful that you do not refuse to listen to the one who is speaking. For if the people of Israel did not escape when they refused to listen to Moses, the earthly messenger, we will certainly not escape if we reject the one who speaks to us from heaven. When God spoke from Mount Sinai, his voice shook the earth. But now he makes another promise. Once again I will shake not only the earth, but the heavens also. This means that all the creation will be shaken and removed, so that only the unshakable things will remain. Since we are receiving a kingdom that is unshakable, let us be thankful and please God by worshiping him with holy fear and awe. For our God is a devouring fire.
That sounds encouraging, doesn't it? Listen, the passage, the ending has to do with the voice saying, there has been a voice that's been speaking all along. The voice of God in the garden. The voice has gone through the whole book. The voice spoke at Mount Sinai. Remember what he said. He did not call them to obedience. He called them to himself. I've carried you on eagle's wings unto myself. They were being called to him, not to the law and not to obedience, but to him. And the voice has been calling. The writer says they rejected the voice at Mount Sinai. But the prophet Haggai came along and said, one more time, I'll speak again. And he cites the fact that at Mount Sinai, it was scary back there. We spent a week talking about that we're not called to fear, we're called to love. But at Mount Sinai, it was pretty scary. But the prophet Haggai says, I'm going to call once again. You're going to hear the voice once again. And I'm not just going to shake mountains like I did at Mount Sinai. I'm shaking heaven and earth. I go, oh, that sounds awful. No, it's great. Because all this crap that's worthless is just going to fall by the wayside. Because it can't stand. In other words, all the things that can be shaken will be shaken. And he says, you're receiving a kingdom. You're receiving the kingdom of God now, and that cannot be shaken. That is an eternal kingdom forever and ever and ever. And that's what you're being offered. That's what the voice is saying to you. Don't refuse his offer, his unconditional offer. Don't refuse the offer like they did before. Look at what they went through, for crying out loud. Do you want to go through that? You don't have to. Christ went through it for us. So he's saying, don't refuse, don't refuse. Your text talks, it says, be thankful. And some translations do. Because it's hard to really get a hold of what it says. It uses the word grace. Therefore, as you're receiving the kingdom, receive grace. That's what it's talking about. Receiving the kingdom and receiving grace. Because that's what the voice is saying. The voice is saying there is grace. And he calls us to receive that grace. Because there's no way to live this life here without the Spirit of grace. Mm-hmm. There's just no way. Not and get anywhere. Did anybody feel a little bit intimidated as she was reading that? Our God is an all-consuming fire. Yeah, he's a devouring fire. Well, that's good news. Let me ask you this. After all what he has said about Zion and the whole thing and the new covenant and Jesus and, the voice that's calling you and the whole thing, it almost sounds like you better watch out. Maybe it's just me. That's the way I've heard it for years. You better watch out because God's an all-consuming fire. And you are going to get fried. And when he fries you, ain't nothing left. It feels like that because we don't exactly know what he's really saying personally. We hear that and it brings us right back. Even though he said, don't go back to Mount Sinai, it brings us back there. Mm-hmm. Fire that consumes, the thunder, and we get scared. And he's saying, no, you've come to Mount Zion. But you do need to know that God is an all-consuming fire. When he talks about serving him with respect and honor, all he's saying is that when you're in a relationship with God, you're going to want to do things for him, with him. That's just going to be the way it is. And he's saying that's right, and that's good. And the very tail end, our God is an all-consuming fire. If you're being purified, it's kind of like it's good and it's bad. Yeah. It's good that you're being purified, but it's not fun. It's not good. Right. Like talking about silver, when they melt silver and the dross comes to the top. It's great that the dross is rising, but while the fire's on you and the heat's on, it's not so good. I don't know anybody that says, oh, yes, that's great. Yeah, I love it. Bring it on. There were different things said that were wonderful. The best way to get a hold of our God is an all-consuming fire, again, is to go back to Sinai, to go back to the wilderness, to go back to what did Moses say? Deuteronomy 4:24.
The Lord your God is a devouring fire. He's a jealous God.
So he's an all-consuming fire. Oh my goodness, he's a jealous God. God calls us to himself, and there are so many things that get in the way of that relationship. And he's promising us, whatever it is, as close as you want to get to me, I will burn up anything that gets in between us. When I say to my wife, I would do anything for you. Anything. I don't care. Because I want to be so close to you, so one with you. And anything that gets in the way, any fear, I will deal with it, and I can. Now, when you hear our God is an all-consuming fire, that he's so jealous for you, because he loves us so, so, so much, beyond our comprehension. If nothing else, God wants to speak to us. is that if we want, it's our call. If you want money to be between you and him, he'll let it stay there. It's your call. Some kind of problem, some kind of, I don't know, whatever it might be. It's our call. He calls us to himself. Being an all-consuming fire just means I will burn up anything that you want me to. How much dross do you want to let go of? You can't deal with it. You can't burn it up. You're not an all-consuming. I am. And I'll take care of it for the sake of our relationship. See, by the time that ends and he says that, we start Hebrews 13.
And loving each other as brothers and sisters.
Yeah. It's like he brings us right back to the very beginning. It's all been dealt with. The first Adam dropped the ball. He had children. There was murder. There was no brotherly love there, at least not from Cain to Abel. The writer of Hebrews is saying, it's all finished. Everything has been done. We're starting new and afresh. This Jesus is having children. We're his children. We're his offspring, his brothers. There's so many different symbols that are used. We got a fresh start. And the first thing he refers to is brotherly love, which is not just in the church. Just love the people that you like loving that are in the church. No, it's everybody. Everybody that you come across. Be prepared to share some kindness and some goodness and love. I can't do that unless I'm receiving a kingdom and the grace to do it. I can't do it. But the work that Christ is doing in me and the grace that he's given me, I can.
Amen.